Captain Jake Morrison stood at the bridge window of the human ship Earth's Voice, watching the massive space station grow larger as they approached. Harmony Junction was the biggest diplomatic station in known space, a giant metal city floating between the stars where different alien races came to talk and make deals. "Dad, look at that!" Danny Morrison pressed his small face against the window next to his father. The 8-year-old boy's eyes were wide with wonder as he saw the station's spinning sections and bright lights. "It's huge!" Jake smiled and put his hand on his son's shoulder. "Pretty amazing, isn't it? This is where humans and aliens work together to keep peace in the galaxy." Lieutenant Commander Lisa Parker walked up to them, holding a data pad. She was Jake's second in command and had been preparing for this mission for months. "Captain, we're cleared for Docking Bay 7. The Vorthak delegation is already aboard and waiting for us." Jake nodded. He had read everything he could about the Vorthak, a race of tall reptilian beings who ruled a large part of space with strict military discipline. This meeting was important. Earth needed the rare metals that the Vorthak controlled, and the Vorthak wanted human technology. If the talks went well, both sides would benefit. "Are you sure it's safe to bring Danny?" Lisa asked quietly. The Vorthak are known for being very formal and serious about their rules. "He'll be fine," Jake said, ruffling his son's hair. "It's his school break, and I promised his mother I'd spend time with him. Besides, seeing diplomacy in action will be good for him." The Earth's Voice docked with a soft thump. Jake straightened his blue diplomatic uniform and checked that Danny's clothes were neat. The boy wore simple pants and a shirt with the Earth flag on it. He looked excited but nervous. Commander Rick Taylor, the ship's security chief, joined them at the airlock. He was a big man with careful eyes who always seemed ready for trouble. "Captain, I've got 6 security officers ready to accompany you. The Vorthak have requested we limit weapons to sidearms only." "Understood," Jake said. "Remember, we're here to make friends, not start fights." The airlock opened with a hiss and they stepped onto Harmony Junction. The station was even more impressive inside. The corridors were wide and tall, with windows showing the stars outside. Aliens of different species walked by, some floating, some crawling, some that looked almost human. Danny stayed close to his father, his eyes trying to take in everything at once. "Dad, what's that one?" he whispered, pointing at a blue creature with 4 arms. "That's a Selrani trader," Jake explained. "They're some of the best merchants in space." A station official approached them. She was human, which made Danny feel more comfortable. "Captain Morrison, I'm Director Kate Wilson. Welcome to Harmony Junction. The Vorthak delegation is waiting in Conference Room 12. As they walked through the station, Danny saw shops selling things from dozens of worlds, restaurants with foods he couldn't identify, and aliens speaking in languages that sounded like music or grinding metal. The air smelled different too, like ozone and spices. "The Vorthak arrived 3 hours ago," Director Wilson explained as they walked. "They brought a large delegation including Admiral Zethkar, their military commander. He's quite important in their society." Jake frowned slightly. He had hoped to deal mainly with diplomats, not military leaders. The Vorthak military was known for being harsh and unforgiving. They reached the conference room and Director Wilson pressed a button. The doors slid open to reveal 5 tall reptilian beings standing around a large table. The Vorthak were impressive and frightening at the same time. They had green-scaled skin, yellow eyes, and moved with the grace of predators. Each one wore a dark military uniform covered in medals and symbols. The tallest Vorthak stepped forward. His scales were darker than the others and a long scar ran down one side of his face. "I am Admiral Zethkar of the Vorthak hegemony," he said in perfect English, though his voice sounded like gravel. "You are Captain Morrison." "I am," Jake replied, stepping forward with confidence. "This is Lieutenant Commander Parker, Commander Taylor, and my son Danny." Admiral Zethkar's yellow eyes fixed on Danny for a moment, and the boy shrank back behind his father's leg. The alien's expression was unreadable. Another Vorthak, shorter and with lighter scales, moved forward. "I am Ambassador Veltar. Welcome to this meeting. We hope for good results from our talks." "As do we," Jake said. The people of Earth are eager to build strong relationships with the Vorthak hegemony. Admiral Zethkar gestured with one clawed hand. Before we begin formal negotiations, it is our custom to show guests our capabilities. We have arranged a tour of our section of the station. Director Wilson stepped forward. The tour will include the Vorthak Cultural Center, their technology displays, and their military exhibition. It should take about 2 hours. Danny tugged on his father's uniform. Can I come too, Dad? Jake looked down at his son's hopeful face. The boy had been looking forward to this trip for weeks. Stay close to me, and don't touch anything without asking, okay? I promise, Danny said eagerly. Admiral Zethkar watched this exchange with what might have been disapproval, but he said nothing. Ambassador Veltar seemed more friendly, even giving Danny a small nod. The group left the conference room and began walking toward the Vorthak section of the station. The corridors here were different, with darker walls and sharper angles. Everything looked designed for efficiency and order. The Vorthak prize discipline above all else, Lisa whispered to Jake as they walked. Their children are raised in military, schools from age 5. Jake nodded, keeping Danny close. He was beginning to wonder if bringing his son had been a mistake, but it was too late now. The tour had begun, and both sides needed this meeting to succeed. As they walked deeper into the Vorthak section, none of them knew that in just a few minutes everything would change. A simple moment of childhood curiosity would turn a routine diplomatic meeting into something that would shake the foundations of human-alien relations. The Vorthak section of Harmony Junction was like walking through a military museum. Everything was perfectly organized and clean. The walls displayed images of Vorthak warriors and their conquests across the galaxy. Danny walked quietly beside his father, his eyes wide as he took in the alien culture around him. Ambassador Veltar led the group through several rooms, explaining Vorthak history and customs. His voice was gentler than Admiral Zethkar's, and he seemed to enjoy teaching the humans about his people. Admiral Zethkar followed behind, saying nothing but watching everything with sharp yellow eyes. This is our cultural center, Veltar said as they entered a large room filled with artifacts. These items represent thousands of years of Vorthak civilization. Danny looked at strange weapons, pieces of armor, and sculptures that seemed to move in the light. Everything was behind protective barriers, but he could see the fine details of the alien craftsmanship. Some of the weapons looked scary, but others were beautiful in their own way. Your people have a long military tradition, Jake observed, noting how many of the displays showed warfare. Indeed, Admiral Zethkar spoke for the first time in several minutes. The Vorthak have survived because we are strong. Strength comes from discipline and order. Lisa noticed how the Admiral's eyes kept moving to Danny, as if the boy's presence bothered him. She stayed close to the child, ready to step in if needed. The tour continued into the technology section. Here, holographic displays showed Vorthak inventions and scientific achievements. Danny was fascinated by a display that showed how Vorthak ships could travel faster than light. The hologram rotated slowly, showing every part of the engine system. Impressive, Commander Taylor said, genuinely interested in the technology. Our engineers would love to learn more about your propulsion systems. Perhaps that can be part of our trade agreement, Ambassador Veltar replied, with what might have been a smile. It was hard to tell with his reptilian features. They moved on to the final section of the tour, the military exhibition. This room was different from the others. It felt more serious, more dangerous. The displays here showed current Vorthak military strength rather than historical artifacts. Admiral Zethkar stepped forward, his posture straighter and more commanding. This is the heart of Vorthak power, he announced. Our military keeps order in 17 star systems. The centerpiece of the room was a large holographic display that showed Vorthak battle formations. Ships moved in precise patterns, demonstrating tactics that had won countless battles. The display was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Danny had been quiet and well-behaved throughout the entire tour, just as he had promised his father. But as they stood watching the military display, something caught his attention. One of the smaller ships in the formation looked different from the others. It had extra parts that glowed with soft blue light. Curious and forgetting his father's warning about not touching anything, Danny stepped closer to get a better look. The holographic display was within reach, and he wanted to see if the glowing parts felt warm like real light. He reached out with one small finger and touched the edge of the hologram. The moment his finger made contact, the display flickered and changed. Alarms didn't sound, but the formation shifted slightly, as if responding to his touch. It was actually an interactive display, designed to teach Vorthak military students about battle tactics. Admiral Zethkar saw what happened and reacted instantly. In Vorthak military culture, touching a battle display without permission was one of the worst insults possible. It suggested that the person thought they could improve on Vorthak military genius. For a child of another species to do such a thing was beyond unacceptable. The Admiral moved faster than anyone expected. His scaled hand swung through the air and struck Danny across the left side of his face. The blow was not meant to seriously injure, but Zethkar's hand was large and his claws were sharp. The force of the hit sent Danny stumbling backward. The sound of the slap echoed through the room like a gunshot. Danny fell to his knees, more shocked than hurt. 3 thin red lines appeared on his cheek where the Admiral's claws had scraped his skin. For a moment, the boy just stared up at the tall alien in confusion and fear. Then the tears came and he began to cry. Jake Morrison's world went red. Every instinct he had as a father exploded into action. He lunged forward and scooped Danny into his arms, checking the scratches on his son's face. They were shallow, but bleeding slightly. Danny buried his face against his father's shoulder, sobbing. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Jake's voice was deadly quiet, the kind of calm that came before a storm. Admiral Zethkar stood straight and showed no sign of regret. The youngling showed disrespect to Vorthak military tradition. Discipline was required. Commander Taylor's hand moved to his sidearm. His security team, who had been standing quietly nearby, tensed and spread out slightly. Lisa stepped closer to Jake and Danny, her diplomatic training warring with her own anger at seeing a child struck. "You hit my son," Jake said, his voice still dangerously calm. "You hit an 8-year-old child who was curious about your display. Age is irrelevant," Admiral Zethkar replied coldly. "Proper behavior must be maintained. In our society, any superior may discipline any youngling who acts improperly." Ambassador Veltar looked horrified. "Zethkar, what have you done? This child is not Vorthak. He is a guest here." He touched a sacred military display. The Admiral growled. "Would you have me ignore such disrespect?" The other Vorthak in the room shifted uncomfortably. Some seemed to agree with their Admiral, while others looked uncertain. The humans stood together, protective and angry. Danny's crying had quieted to sniffles, but he kept his face hidden against his father's shoulder. The scratches on his cheek had stopped bleeding, but they would leave marks for days. Jake Morrison had been a soldier before he became a diplomat. He had fought in 3 different conflicts and commanded ships in battle. But he had never felt rage like this before. Someone had hurt his child, his innocent little boy who had only wanted to see how alien technology worked. "I want an apology," Jake said, his voice like ice. "Right now." Admiral Zethkar's yellow eyes narrowed. "I do not apologize for maintaining proper discipline." The standoff began. Human and Vorthak faced each other across the military exhibition room, while an 8-year-old boy with scratches on his face clung to his father and tried not to cry anymore. Neither side knew it yet, but this moment would change everything. What started as a simple diplomatic meeting was about to become something much bigger, something that would test the limits of interspecies relations and show the galaxy what happened when someone threatened a human child. The silence in the military exhibition room was thick and dangerous. Jake Morrison held his son close, feeling Danny's small body shake against his chest. The scratches on the boy's cheek had stopped bleeding, but they were still red and angry. "Looking. I said I want an apology," Jake repeated, his voice steady but full of controlled fury. "You struck my child, a guest on this station, an 8-year-old boy who meant no harm." Admiral Zethkar stood tall and unmoved. His scaled face showed no emotion except perhaps mild annoyance. "Human, your youngling interfered with a sacred display of Vorthak military power. In our culture, such behavior requires immediate correction. I have done nothing wrong." Commander. Taylor had his hand ready near his weapon. His security team spread out behind him, creating a protective formation around Jake and Danny. The Vorthak guards noticed this movement and shifted their own positions. The room was one wrong word away from violence. Ambassador Veltar stepped between the two groups, his lighter scales almost pale with worry. Please let us all stay calm. Admiral Zethkar, perhaps we should discuss this privately. There is nothing to discuss, the Admiral replied harshly. The discipline was proper and necessary. If humans cannot control their younglings, they should not bring them to important places. Jake felt his anger burn hotter, but he forced himself to speak calmly. Danny is a child. He was curious about your technology. That's what children do. They learn by exploring. Then they should learn proper respect first, Zethkar said coldly. Vorthak younglings would never dare touch a military display without permission. Lisa stepped forward, her diplomatic training taking over despite her own anger. Admiral, surely you understand that different species have different customs regarding children. What seems natural to a Vorthak child might be different for a human child. Weakness, the Admiral said simply. You coddle your young and make them soft. This is why humans will never be truly strong. Those words were the wrong thing to say. Jake's face went completely cold, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded ships in battle. Commander Taylor, please, escort my son back to our ship. Lieutenant Commander Parker, contact Earth Command immediately. Tell them that a Vorthak military officer has assaulted a human child during diplomatic proceedings. Dad, I don't want to leave you, Danny whispered, finally lifting his head from his father's shoulder. Jake gently touched his son's uninjured cheek. It's okay, buddy. Go with Commander Taylor. I need to handle this. Taylor carefully took Danny's hand. Come on, son. Let's get those scratches looked at by the ship's doctor. As they left the room, Jake turned his full attention back to Admiral Zethkar. You have one chance to apologize and make this right. If you don't, this becomes an official diplomatic incident. Let it become whatever you wish, the Admiral Mon replied. I will not apologize for maintaining proper order. Ambassador Veltar looked desperate. Admiral, please reconsider. This could destroy years of potential cooperation between our peoples. If humans are so weak that they cannot accept proper discipline, then perhaps cooperation is impossible, Zethkar said. Within minutes, word of the incident began spreading through Harmony Junction. Other diplomatic delegations heard whispers about the confrontation between humans and Vorthak. Some species had children of their own and understood human anger. Others thought the humans were overreacting to simple discipline. Lisa finished her emergency communication with Earth Command and returned to Jake's side. Sir, Admiral Ross is en route with the Third Fleet. She'll be here in 6 hours. Jake nodded grimly. Admiral Betty Ross was known throughout human space as someone who didn't back down from anyone or anything. If she was coming personally, it meant Earth was taking this very seriously. Ambassador Veltar overheard this and his scaled face went even paler. Admiral Zethkar, the humans are bringing military forces. We must resolve this before it gets worse. Let them come, the Admiral said. But for the first time, some of his confidence seemed forced. The Vorthak fear no one. This isn't about fear, Jake said quietly. This is about justice. You hurt my child. In human culture, that demands a response. Other Vorthak officers began whispering among themselves. Some seemed to support their admiral, but others looked worried. Ambassador Veltar was clearly unhappy with how things were developing. Director Wilson arrived with station security, having heard about the confrontation. Gentlemen, I must ask everyone to remain calm. Harmony Junction is neutral territory. We cannot allow conflicts here. Tell that to the Admiral, Jake replied. He's the one who started this by assaulting a child. The youngling needed discipline, Zethkar repeated stubbornly. Director Wilson looked at the scratches on Danny's face as Commander Taylor brought the boy back for a moment to show the station officials what had happened. Her expression hardened when she saw the claw marks. Admiral, she said carefully, striking the child of another species during diplomatic proceedings violates several interstellar treaties. This is a serious matter. Human treaties. The Admiral. Dismissed. The Vorthak recognize only strength. Ambassador Veltar finally lost his patience with his military counterpart. Zethkar, enough. Even by our own laws, harming another species young during diplomatic contact is forbidden. You know this. This was news to the humans. Jake looked at the ambassador with new interest. Your own laws forbid this? Yes, Veltar admitted reluctantly. When we meet with other species, we must respect their customs regarding their young. It is part of our diplomatic code. Admiral Zethkar acted outside his authority. The Admiral's yellow eyes flashed with anger at being contradicted by his own diplomat. I acted to maintain respect for Vorthak military tradition. You acted foolishly, Veltar shot back. And now you may have ruined everything we hope to accomplish here. News continued to spread throughout the station. The Selrani traders whispered about it in their markets. The peaceful Andrari meditors sent messages of concern to their homeworld. Even the usually neutral station administrators were taking sides. Jake received another message from Lisa. Earth Command had declared the situation a Priority 1 diplomatic crisis. 3 more battle groups were being dispatched to reinforce. Admiral Ross. The message was clear. Earth would not tolerate attacks on human children. Admiral Zethkar, Jake said formally, you have until Admiral Ross arrives to apologize and make proper amends for striking my son. If you refuse, this becomes something much bigger than either of us. I do not bow to threats, the Admiral replied, but his voice lacked some of its earlier certainty. Ambassador Veltar made one last desperate attempt at peace. Admiral, I beg you to reconsider. The child was not harmed seriously. A simple apology could end this now. Never, Zethkar said firmly. Jake nodded grimly. Then we'll do this the hard way. The lines were drawn. On one side stood the humans, protective and angry, backed by the approaching might of Earth's fleet. On the other side stood Admiral Zethkar, proud and stubborn, refusing to admit any wrongdoing. In between stood Ambassador Veltar and the other species on the station, hoping desperately that wisdom would prevail before the situation exploded into something much worse. The clock was ticking. Admiral Ross would arrive soon, and when she did, the galaxy would learn what happened when someone hurt a human child. 6 hours later, the space around Harmony Junction lit up with the blue glow of human ships dropping out of hyperspace. Admiral Betty Ross had not come alone. The massive battleship Defender led a formation of 12 human warships, their weapons powered down but clearly visible. Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck with Danny beside him, watching the fleet arrive. The scratches on his son's face had been treated by the ship's doctor, but they were still clearly visible. Danny pressed close to his father, still shaken by what had happened. Dad, are those ships here because of me? Danny asked quietly. Jake put his arm around his son's shoulders. They're here because what happened to you was wrong and humans protect their children. Always. Admiral Ross docked her personal shuttle at Harmony Junction 2 hours after her fleet arrived. She was a tall woman with gray hair and steel blue eyes that seemed to see everything. Her reputation preceded her. She had fought in more battles than most people could count and had never backed down from a fight when human lives were at stake. Director Wilson met her at the airlock along with Jake and his senior officers. Admiral Ross, welcome to Harmony Junction. I hope we can resolve this situation peacefully. That depends entirely on the Vorthak, Ross replied curtly. Where is the alien who struck the child? Admiral Zethkar is in the Vorthak section with his delegation, Wilson answered. Ambassador Veltar has been trying to convince him to apologize, but so far he refuses. Ross turned to Jake. Captain Morrison, I want to see your son. Jake brought Danny forward. The boy looked small next to the imposing admiral, but he stood straight and tried to be brave. Ross knelt down to his level and gently examined the scratches on his cheek. Did it hurt? She asked softly. A little, Danny admitted. But I was more scared than hurt. The admiral looked really angry. Ross's expression hardened as she stood up. No one should make a child afraid like that. No one. The admiral's arrival. had sent shockwaves through the station. Every species delegation was talking about the human response. Some thought it was excessive to bring a battle fleet over one incident. Others, especially those with children of their own, understood completely. Ross requested an immediate meeting with the Vorthak delegation. Ambassador Veltar agreed quickly, hoping the presence of such a high-ranking human officer might convince Admiral Zethkar to be reasonable. The meeting took place in the same conference room where the diplomatic talks had originally been scheduled. Admiral Ross entered with Jake and Lisa, while the Vorthak delegation included both Zethkar and Veltar, along with 3 other officers. Admiral Zethkar, Ross said without any formal greeting, "You struck a human child during diplomatic proceedings. This is unacceptable." The Vorthak admiral met her gaze without flinching. "The youngling showed disrespect to Vorthak military tradition. I maintained proper discipline." "Proper discipline?" Ross's voice was dangerously quiet. "You're talking about an 8-year-old boy who was curious about your technology, a child who meant no harm and posed no threat." "Ignorance is not an excuse for disrespect," Zethkar replied coldly. Ambassador Veltar tried to intervene. "Admiral Ross, please understand that Admiral Zethkar comes from a very different cultural background. Perhaps we can find a compromise." "There is no compromise when it comes to harming children," Ross said firmly. "I'm giving you 24 hours to provide a formal apology and appropriate reparations. If you refuse, there will be consequences." "What kind of consequences?" Zethkar asked, his yellow eyes narrowing. Ross smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. "The kind that will show you and everyone else in this galaxy that humans don't tolerate attacks on their young." "Are you threatening me?" the Admiral demanded. "I'm promising you," Ross replied calmly. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Ambassador Veltar looked desperate, knowing that his hopes for a trade agreement were disappearing with each harsh word exchanged. After the meeting, Ross gathered her officers and the Morrison family in a private room. Danny sat quietly while the adults talked, still processing everything that had happened to him. "Ma'am, what's your plan if Zethkar doesn't apologize?" Jake asked. Ross looked at Danny for a long moment before answering. "We're going to show the Vorthak something they've never seen before. They think discipline and strength only come from fear and punishment. We're going to prove them wrong." "How?" Lisa asked. "By demonstrating that protecting our young makes us stronger, not weaker," Ross explained. "I've been studying Vorthak culture since I received your distress call. They respect strength above all else, so we're going to show them true strength." Meanwhile, in the Vorthak section, a heated argument was taking place. Ambassador Veltar was trying desperately to convince Admiral Zethkar to apologize. "You have seen their response," Veltar said urgently. 12 warships for 1 child. Do you understand what this means? Human parents will fight entire wars to protect their young. "It means they are emotional and weak," Zethkar replied stubbornly. "They waste resources on sentiment. Or it means they are more dangerous than we realized," another Vorthak officer said quietly. "A species that fights so hard for their children will fight even harder for their worlds." Veltar nodded eagerly. "Exactly. Admiral, I have studied human history. They have fought wars across their entire planet to protect their young. When their children are threatened, humans become more dangerous than any predator." But Zethkar remained unmoved. "I will not apologize for maintaining proper order. If they want a fight, they will have one." As the 24-hour deadline approached, other species on the station began taking sides. The peaceful Andrari sent a message supporting the human position, stating that harming children violated universal moral principles. The traitor species offered to mediate, seeing potential profit in preventing a war. The insectoid Kree, who laid thousands of eggs and saw individual young as expendable, supported the Vorthak position. But they were in the minority. Most species understood that attacking someone's child was crossing a line that should never be crossed. Ross spent the time preparing her demonstration. She contacted other human ships in the area and requested volunteers for a special mission. The response was overwhelming. Every human ship within 3-star systems volunteered to help show the galaxy how humans protected their own. Danny spent time with his father, talking about what had happened and trying to understand why the alien had hurt him. Jake explained as best he could about different cultures and misunderstandings, but also made sure his son knew that what happened wasn't his fault. "Dad, why did Admiral Ross bring so many ships just for me?" Danny asked. Jake knelt down and took his son's hands. "Because every human child matters, Danny. You matter. And when someone hurts one of us, especially a child, all of humanity responds. That's who we are." As the deadline approached, Ambassador Veltar made one final desperate attempt to change Zethkar's mind. "Admiral, I beg you to reconsider. This could start a war between our species." "Then let it start," Zethkar said coldly. "The Vorthak have never backed down from humans, and we will not start now." The 24 hours passed without an apology. Admiral Ross received the news calmly, as if she had expected it all along. She looked at Jake and nodded grimly. "It's time to show them what human strength really looks like," she said. The demonstration was about to begin, and the galaxy was about to learn why threatening a human child was the worst mistake anyone could make. Admiral Ross stood in the main observation deck of Harmony Junction, looking out at the space around the station. Her 12 ships had been joined by 8 more human vessels that had arrived during the night. 20 warships now surrounded the station, their hulls gleaming in the starlight. "Admiral Zethkar has refused to apologize," Director Wilson reported nervously. "He says he will not bow to human threats." Ross nodded calmly. "Then it's time for the demonstration." Jake Morrison stood nearby with Danny, who was wearing a small bandage over the scratches on his cheek. The boy had insisted on watching whatever was about to happen, saying he wanted to see how humans protected their children. "What kind of demonstration?" Ambassador Veltar asked. He had come to observe, hoping desperately that whatever the humans planned wouldn't make things worse. "Admiral Zethkar believes that protecting children makes humans weak," Ross explained. "He thinks our love for our young is a flaw that enemies can exploit. We're going to prove him wrong." She activated the station's communication system so her voice could be heard throughout Harmony Junction. "This is Admiral Betty Ross of the Earth Defense Force. In 1 hour we will demonstrate why harming human children is the gravest mistake anyone can make." The hour passed slowly. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in observation areas throughout the station. Word had spread across the galaxy about the confrontation, and many wanted to see how it would end. Admiral Zethkar arrived at the observation deck with several Vorthak officers. He looked confident and unmoved by the display of human ships around the station. "Your fleet does not frighten me, human. The Vorthak have faced larger forces." "This isn't about frightening you," Ross replied quietly. "This is about education." Danny, exactly the appointed time, the human ships began to move. But instead of attacking or threatening, they did something unexpected. They formed a perfect protective sphere around Harmony Junction, with each ship positioned to defend the station from any possible threat. "A defensive formation," Ambassador Veltar observed with surprise. "They're not preparing to attack. They're preparing to protect." Ross smiled slightly. "That's lesson 1, Admiral Zethkar. When humans see something precious that needs protection, our first instinct isn't to destroy our enemies. It's to shield what we love." The demonstration continued, as more human ships arrived from nearby systems. Within 2 hours, 50 human vessels surrounded the station, but they maintained their protective formation, never once pointing weapons at the Vorthak or anyone else. "I don't understand," Zethkar said, his confidence starting to waver. "Why? Do you waste so many ships on one station?" "Because my son is on this station," Jake said quietly. "And because every human commander in this sector knows that protecting children is our highest duty." Ross activated another communication channel. "Captain Stevens, begin Phase 2 of the demonstration." The space around the station suddenly filled with activity as the human ships began conducting rescue drills. They practiced evacuating civilians from damaged vessels, defending supply convoys, and establishing safe zones for non-combatants. Every drill focused on protecting innocent lives rather than destroying enemies. This is what human strength looks like, Ross explained to the watching crowd. We don't measure power by how many we can kill. We measure it by how many we can save. Admiral Zethkar watched in growing confusion as the human fleet demonstrated level after level of defensive tactics. But where is your attack formation? Your battle plans? We have those too, Ross admitted. But they come second. Protection comes first. Always. During the demonstration, something unexpected happened. Danny Morrison had been watching quietly, but suddenly he walked away from his father. Before anyone could stop him, he approached Admiral Zethkar. Admiral? Danny said softly, holding up a piece of paper. I made this for you. Zethkar looked down at the small human child who had offered him a drawing. On the paper, drawn in crayon, were human ships and Vorthak ships flying together among the stars. At the bottom, in a child's handwriting, were the words, "Friends in Space." I'm not mad at you anymore, Danny said simply. Dad explained that, you were trying to teach me about your culture. I'm sorry I touched your display without asking. The massive Vorthak admiral stared at the drawing, then at the child who was offering him forgiveness. Around them, the human fleet continued its protective demonstrations, 50 warships devoted entirely to keeping everyone safe. Something broke inside Admiral Zethkar's rigid worldview. Here was the child he had struck, offering him friendship and understanding. Here was a species that had brought 50 warships not to attack but to protect. Here was a demonstration of strength unlike anything he had ever seen. The Admiral began, then stopped. His voice, usually so commanding, was uncertain. I do not understand humans. That's okay, Danny said with a child's simple wisdom. I don't understand Vorthak either, but maybe we can learn about each other. Ambassador Veltar watched in amazement as his military superior knelt down to Danny's level. For the first time in his long career, Admiral Zethkar looked uncertain and almost vulnerable. Young human, Zethkar said slowly, I struck you because I believed you showed disrespect. In my culture, discipline comes through force and fear. In our culture, Jake said, stepping forward, discipline comes through teaching and understanding. Admiral Ross joined the group, her expression softer now. Admiral Zethkar, you wanted to see human strength. You're looking at it. That boy just forgave someone who hurt him. His father brought him here to learn about other cultures even after what happened. That's the strength that protects our children and builds our civilization. The Vorthak Admiral stood slowly, still holding Danny's drawing. Around them, the human fleet maintained its protective formation, a living demonstration of their values in action. I have made an error, Zethkar said finally, not just in striking the child, but in understanding what it meant. I believed human protection of young showed weakness. I see now that it shows the deepest strength. He looked directly at Jake Morrison. Captain, I formally apologize for striking your son. My actions were wrong by both our laws and yours. From his belt, Admiral Zethkar removed a ceremonial blade with an ornate handle carved from Vorthak crystal. This is my personal honor blade, carried by my family for 12 generations. I offer it as reparation for my wrong action. Jake accepted the blade with both hands, recognizing the significance of the gesture. Apology accepted, Admiral, and perhaps this can be the beginning of better understanding between our peoples. Danny looked up at the tall alien who had scared him so badly just days before. Does this mean we can be friends now? Admiral Zethkar's reptilian features moved in what might have been a smile. Yes, young human, perhaps we can be friends. The crisis was over, but its effects would last for generations. The demonstration became legendary throughout the galaxy, studied by military academies and diplomatic schools alike. It showed that true strength didn't come from the ability to destroy, but from the commitment to protect. Years later, Admiral Zethkar would become one of the strongest advocates for human-Vorthak cooperation. He often spoke about the day a human child taught him the difference between power and strength, and how a fleet of warships showed him that the greatest military force was one dedicated to protection rather than destruction. Danny Morrison grew up to become a diplomatic officer, specializing in interspecies relations. He kept the Vorthak honor blade in his office as a reminder that understanding and forgiveness could prevent wars and build lasting peace. And throughout human space, the story was told and retold. The day the galaxy learned what happened when someone threatened a human child, and how that moment of darkness became a light that brought two species together.